I think these Western institutions in Europe, in the UK, and adjacent spaces did not want to have to do something radical that could be used against themselves in terms of diplomatic rhetoric as being infringements on free speech, because that was such a powerful weapon on normative grounds, on diplomatic and universal human rights grounds. It made sense to sanction North Korea or Iran when they arrested a journalist. They would only step in, just being frank, if it was a CIA back or a UK Foreign Office back journal. I mean, this thing was always the kind of self-interested aspect of free speech diplomacy in the Cold War. But the fact that there was a hard legal distinction between the laws of the Soviet Union, the laws behind the Iron Curtain, and the laws in the United States and the UK and our transatlantic partners. We could easily define what authoritarianism was versus what democracy was on the basis of freedom of speech, freedom of association, the Western these kind of civil liberties and human rights. And we could point to a million examples. It was very easy to caricature, to create that picture, because there were simply things that they did, things that, even though we had our own methods of repression in various ways, there were red lines we would not cross. And they are now at the point where we've crossed these red lines. We've crossed them in Europe, for example, with the DSA, with the Online Safety Act. We've not crossed them so far that, for example, I mentioned 4chan being sued is a different thing than, $100 million fine against Facebook or something that's like such a large amount they take action, or a high-level U.S. political figure. Again, they always start these things with these marginal figures and create the legal tapestry and create the momentum and the stakeholder buy-in, and you sort of boil the frog and get used to it. That's why they couldn't censor. They censored everyone around Trump before they censored Trump. And this led to conservatives being able to deny that there was a political targeting of censorship in 2017, 2018. Republicans in Congress said, "What do you mean censorship? I don't see any censorship." And it was because it was the people just to the right of them, or it was people, who just had an issue they didn't care about. But what I'm saying is you see 12,000 arrests in Britain. I forget the multiple, so I don't want to misquote it, but it is like orders of magnitude more than get arrested in Russia.
Yes.
Orders of magnitude more than in Russia. And that argument that what distinguishes a free society from one under the thumb of a dictator is people being arrested for journalism and free expression is an argument that
or
is
jokes.
hard, right? Or jokes is an argument that gets harder and harder to make, and it has. I think it's part of this kind of dissolving set of alliances in this restructuring of a lot of the alliance structure as Europe, the US, China, India, and Russia are reshuffling because of sanctions policy around Ukraine, because of trade and tariffs, and the human rights cudgel, the civil liberties cudgel, is now a lot less powerful than it was because we've lost credibility. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stood at the Joe Biden Democracy Summit and pointed out how hypocritical it was for the United States to complain about free speech in China because China had never censored their own president.
But by the way, I think about a month ago in Hong Kong, the authorities are giving the example of America and saying there's not free speech there. Why should you have free speech here? In the case for Jimmy Lai, who's the guy behind Apple News, who's been in jail for some time now. And so they're literally, I think they even reference, maybe it was Britain they referenced, but the point being they're referencing countries in the West who don't have free speech and say, why should you have free speech here? So, an authoritarian, totalitarian CCP government is literally looking at us as a point of comparison. It's nuts.
But rightly so. I mean, that is, unfortunately, until these things are repealed, Because it's not just the hearts and minds argument. When these things get litigated in courts, a judge, if they're objective at all, has to look at, okay, well, if this is, international law and the UN Declaration on Human Rights of free speech, or, is this really a violation of the UN Charter if China is doing it when it's actually worse in many respects in the UK, or if it's okay here. There is this international norm setting, these global principles, and I just think it's the diplomatic backlash is already significant, and it could compound to something enormous that could completely reshuffle alliance structures if it escalates.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.